and welcome to the July 15th evening of public hearings. So thank you all so much for coming. I'm going to just remind a few of you of the rules here. The first public hearing is an ordinance extending the term of ordinance number 20170, granting to Northwest Natural Gas Company, a corporation, a 20-year non-exclusive right and franchise to lay, maintain, and operate facilities in the public way within the city of Eugene, Oregon, and providing for the payment of compensation to the city. Do we need any further explanation of that today?
No, ma'am.
All right. So the hearing is open. Those wishing to speak during the public hearing must submit a completed request to speak form to the information desk prior to the beginning of the public hearing. When you come to the podium, please give your name, city of residence, and for Eugene residents, your ward, if known. You will have 3 minutes to comment. There are lights on the timer. The red light indicates the end of the 3 minutes, and we have 10 speakers tonight. So first up is Ruana Garden, who will be followed by Jim Ball.
Can you hear me? Mm-hmm. Hi, I'm Ruana Garden. I'm not a member of Eugene. I'm from Springfield, and Springfield City Council has no say in this fight because Eugene does the franchise for the city that I live in. So I've come here to talk to you. I want you to know that I have natural gas in my home, but I've also put in a heat pump, and it's important to me to phase out natural gas. It is a fossil fuel, no matter how much they want to use the word natural and tout it as clean. And I also want to address that I understand the prospect of losing the franchise money is scary. And I'm sure that as gas gets reduced, the use of electricity will increase, and that will once again bring money back to all the towns that now get franchise money from now Northwest Natural Gas. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Ball, followed by Linda Heil.
Good evening. I'm Jim Ball. I'm a resident of Eugene, Ward 2. EWEB uses a document called an Integrated Electric Resource Plan, IERP, to forecast future demand for electricity and how they plan to meet that demand. The most recent full IERP was done in 2011, and it projected a 1% annual growth rate in demand. There was an update to the IERP in June 2018, and that reduced the expected growth rate of electrical demand to only 0.4%. That's less than the rate of population increase. I don't see any mention in these EWEB documents of expected increases due to electric cars or to switching buildings from natural gas to electricity. There's no reference to Eugene's climate plan in EWEB's resource plan. But the recommendations in the gap analysis call for eventually substituting electricity for all fossil fuel energy. This seems to assume that EWEB can provide enough energy to replace fossil fuels and still deliver electricity that's 90% renewable and affordable. I would like to see some evidence to support that assumption. If the City Council wants to change the franchise agreement to force people to switch from natural gas to electricity, then shouldn't you first confirm that EWEB can supply enough renewable electricity at an affordable cost? I recommend that you ask EWEB to fast-track a new IERP that specifically addresses this question, and that you extend the existing franchise agreement with Northwest Natural until EWEB provides a clear answer to that question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Linda Heil, followed by Betsy Hitz.
Good evening. My name is Linda Heil. I do live in Eugene. I live in Ward 2. Councillor Clark's remarks following public comment last week told me that 350 advocates are not being clear in our requests, or Councillor Clark is not listening, or likely some of both. I will speak as directly as possible tonight, and I will ask councilors to listen carefully, please. 350 Eugene is not suggesting that the Northwest Natural Franchise Agreement should be allowed to lapse. We are asking council to use the franchise agreement or a parallel binding legal agreement to institute measures regulating the use of gas that will reduce its carbon emissions. And we are asking that these regulations go into effect soon, allowing Northwest Natural no more time to expand its system and increase its carbon emissions as it is doing now. Since HB 2020 is no longer on the table, we see no reason for a long delay. If the franchise agreement is extended, we expect that the plans for regulating gas use in Eugene will nonetheless be included in the cap when it is finalized by December. Then those regulations can be formalized with a new franchise agreement within a few months. Also, about a comment Councilor Zelenka has made in previous discussions about gas regulations, that transportation is the biggest source of emissions in Eugene. This is correct. Transportation accounts for about half of emissions, and gas and electric together account for about 1/3. Gas alone, however, accounts for 92% of that 1/3 share. So, recall that the bulk of contributions currently included in the cap will be made by the transportation sector. Meeting the goals of the Transportation System Plan will require significant investment in complete streets with priority for walkers, bikers, and bus riders equal to that of cars, and compact development along Eugene's designated transportation corridors. 350 Eugene supports complete streets and transportation corridors 100%. But more reductions from transportation will not be sufficient if reductions from gas are excluded. The remaining gap is so large that filling it will require steep reductions from gas as well as more reductions from transportation sources. I ask each of you to devote a few hours before September to rereading the GAP strategy documented as recently updated by Good Company and deciding which measures you will recommend in the fall to complete the cap. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Betsy Hitz, followed by Sarah Barant.
Good evening. I'm Betsy Hitz, and I live in Eugene, Ward 1. With the demise of House Bill 2020, Council has no viable reason to postpone formation of a new franchise agreement with Northwest Natural Gas or to include a new franchise agreement in the Climate Action Plan. Both of these actions are necessary to meet our climate recovery ordinance goals. I urge the council to direct staff to provide a draft franchise agreement at the end of the council's summer break. It should include recommendations for actions to require Northwest Natural to meet the carbon reduction goals of the climate recovery ordinance, recommendations from the council's work sessions, the Sustainability Commission, Matt McRae and Josh Scove, and 350 Eugene. In particular, I am highly impressed with the plan that McRae and Scove have outlined, which provides multiple options, taking into account how Northwest Natural responds to the climate crisis with a new business direction, and the rare possibility of an Oregon carbon tax. I also urge the council to direct staff to include the new franchise agreement in the Climate Action Plan. We are in a climate emergency, and especially since national and state action is slow to actualize, cities need to take bold action now. Politicians, like all of you, and the staff who do your bidding, are uniquely positioned to move Eugene in the direction of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I urge each of you to get out of the rut of business as usual, to move beyond being bystanders. I urge each of you to have the courage to look at the climate crisis and to use your power as an elected official to do whatever it takes to stabilize our life-sustaining atmosphere. Assure that Eugene does its part. I guess the 8 years I spent as a cheerleader was not for nothing. Go, Eugene City Government. Do the right thing. Your constituents are behind you, and time is of the essence, and I thank you.
8 years?
Thank you. Sarah Barant, followed by Jim New.
Rah, rah. Go team. I'm Sarah Brandt. I live in Emily's ward. I couldn't attend the last work session on the Northwest Natural Franchise Agreement because I picked up a virus from one of my grandkids. I couldn't attend the last council meeting because I was watching them while their parents worked. Bless those amazing virus-carrying kids and their busy, hardworking, millennial parents. They're why I miss many 350 meetings and actions. And they're also why I can't put off for a year or more my involvement in climate activism. Why I can't wait for the children to grow up or for our state legislators to stop taking money from fossil fuel interests and take action instead on behalf of Oregon's children. The American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the CDC, World Health Organization, and others have issued a call to action on climate, naming climate change what it is, a grave public health emergency. It's clear to me that sacrifices will have to be made in our individual and collective lives in order to bring emissions down. It's clear to me that in order to bring emissions down, we've got to do away with fracked gas. Waiting a year won't change this fact. With this in mind, the city must set a moratorium on new Northwest Natural customers and infrastructure. Our updated climate action plan must include regulations that lower emissions from gas use and mandate a citywide transition to electric by 2030. Over the next 10 years, Northwest Natural must be required to purchase offsets, investing in reforestation and/or clean energy. The company must be required to stop incentivizing the switch to gas. It's clear to me we can't wait for the larger entities to act. We must act like the village we are and tend to the children's present and future well-being. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Jim New, followed by Krista Niddle.
Mayor, Council, and Acting City Manager. Thanks. My name is Jim New. I live in Ward 7. Thanks to a Republican State Senate strong-arm tactics and a couple of Democratic state senators interested in re-election than in the future of their constituents, HB 2020 appears to be shelved for another year. The COE, the City of Eugene Climate Action Plan gap remains with no state policy hope for carbon reduction help. The cost of new renewable natural gas infrastructure is beyond Northwest Gas budget forecast, even though the gas industry has already started the Smart Energy program to get their customers to fund RNG infrastructure. Senate Bill 98's carbon policy on RNG will not help Northwest Gas deep decarbonization plan, as they have completed few measurable RNG projects as exemplifying their goals. Northwest Gas Senior Vice President of Operations Kim Heiting was relying on state policy as help for carbon reduction. She mentioned it several times at the May 22nd Northwest Gas work session when Councilor Surratt, Ye, and Taylor asked her carbon reduction goal questions. Both the city and Northwest Gas were hoping to kick the carbon bucket to Salem by letting state policy absorb the gaps. Cap and invest never materialized, and even with SB 98 support, biogas can only make up 22% of Northwest Gas' annual supply of gas in Oregon, according to a 2018 ODOE Oregon Department of Energy report, not meeting compliance. A one-year extension of the Northwest Gas franchise agreement allows the utility to install fossil fuel carbon polluting gas infrastructure that will be around for a minimum of 40 years. So the one-year extension becomes a 41-year extension. This definitely does not align with the CRO, does not reduce carbon emissions, does not promote fuel switching from gas to electric, and does not set an example to the community to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I urge council to direct staff to provide a draft at the end of the council's summer break. It should include information received from work sessions, the Sustainability Commission, Mr. McCray and Mr. Scove's recommendations, and 350 Eugene's suggestions that list the numerous actions to require Northwest Gas to meet the carbon reduction goals of the Climate Recovery Ordinance. These tools are in your toolbox. You just have to have the political will to use them. Thank you.
Thank you. Krista Niddle, followed by Tim Morris.
Good evening. I'm Krista Niddle, and I live in Springfield. And because the Springfield City Council has no say in this matter, I urge you to not renew the contract because we have heat pump technology and we need to put all our support behind that. We know it works. It not only heats our homes, but it cools our homes. It uses electricity, which does not emit like natural gas does. Natural gas emits 8 times the amount of greenhouse gases compared to electricity. So we need to listen to scientists who say we have 11 years to completely change our system of, our lifestyle. And so we have no time to lose. We need to shift to more renewable energy immediately. And that includes not renewing the contract with Northwest Natural. Thanks.
Thank you. Tim Morris, followed by Ryan Moore.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Tim Morris, and I live in Ward 1. I want to point out and recognize the fact that we were all anticipating and patiently waiting for House Bill 2020 to pass. We were all excited about it, and then our illustrious senators decided to take a vacation. So we are now in this position where House Bill 2020 is no longer on the table, so we must take direct and immediate action to address our climate change. I urge you to not delay the Northwest Natural Gas franchise plan. It was just mentioned we have 11 years in order to prevent irreversible damage to our climate and to our planet. We must take local action because our state is clearly not able to. So the very first question in the triple bottom line is about the environment. How would this proposal affect environmental health and our ability to effectively address climate change? It's the first question in the triple bottom line, and it's the question that's on the table now. I hope that the City Council and all the people that are here do not take the same actions that our Senate Republicans took and try to delay taking action on our climate change. And I hope that we take direct and immediate action now. Thank you.
Thank you. Ryan Moore, followed by Michael Gannon.
Hello, Mayor Vinnis and City Council. Thanks for the chance to talk tonight. I'm going to be brief. I live in Ward 8. I'm going to be brief and try not to repeat anything that's been said. Not a lot of people in our area know that 90% of our energy comes from renewable sources. We're really fortunate here to have a lot of hydropower available to us, along with some other things. To me, this highlights the importance of natural gas as a regulatory lever available to you guys. And now that House Bill 2020 has failed, I think, as other people have said before me, I won't repeat much of it, but it's really important that we get this right, and I'm glad that we're talking about it right now. Some of you know I worked in Salem during the recent legislative session as a legislative aide. One of the things that I noticed about House Bill 2020 that I haven't heard talked a lot about here is the mechanisms it had to alleviate the burden that would be placed on low-income folks by increasing price of natural gas. And I think there's potential for any modifications to the agreement we make to increase the cost. And I know that a lot of low-income folks here rely on natural gas, so if there's any way we can include a mechanism to alleviate that burden specifically, I don't know if there's a way to do that even. It's just something I noticed was in the bill that we haven't talked a lot about here. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker, Michael Gannon.
Good evening, councilors. I'm Michael Gannon. I live in Eugene. I've been concerned about climate change for quite some time. I made T-shirts in my T-shirt printing shop in the early 90s to try to connect snowboarders from Eugene going across the mountain passes and burning up a lot of fossil fuel, which were harming frogs and other amphibians in the Cascade Lakes, according to research at Oregon State that said it was climate change related. That was in '93. Lately, I've been attending these council sessions for the last several years, and I continue to see tiny inroads into solving the problems. And it's really disappointing. I see 8 counselors sitting here sort of unemotionally making us wonder if you're paying attention. I think Pete Buttigieg would have been happy to have somebody like me nudge him in the early stages of his presidency so that today wasn't trying to explain why he got rid of their first black police chief and how unacceptable it was for a policeman not wearing his required video equipment to shoot someone and kill them. And I mention this because I think it's important for you to wonder about how your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren are going to come back to talk to you about this. You have, in this little decision with Northwest Natural Gas, an opportunity to get the attention of the nation. Right now, I think it's the Merkel family. Maybe I have their name not pronounced right. They're a group of the stockbrokers that Peter DeFazio has been trying to charge a sales tax on when they make a stock transaction, which has earned them millions of dollars so that they could finance Breitbart News and get Trump elected president. And that is because people are watching the stock market, and they'll be watching Northwest Natural Gas for the tiniest variation, which coming from Eugene could indicate that the people here have a really, really powerful urge to protect their future.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And that closes the public hearing. I have Councilor Zelenka, Councilor Syret. Any other councilors wishing to speak? Okay, Councilor Zelenka.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming out this evening. I've been advocating for us to enter into a binding legal agreement with a willing partner in Northwest Natural Gas, and I believe that will be a much more fruitful path and will get results a lot faster as opposed to working with a franchise fee agreement, which will be met with stiff legal opposition and take a lot longer and will be a lot less fruitful. So I think that path is clearly the way to go. And done right, it can get us enforceable actions that will help us meet our CRO goals. And as a backstop, we always have the franchise fee agreement, and Northwest Natural knows that. With the failure of HB 2020, the Cap and Invest bill, I believe this task actually got harder to accomplish, not easier, in that the Cap and Invest bill actually would have set a price on carbon and would have, that we could peg off of in this agreement, but now that's temporarily not the case until HB 2020 comes back, hopefully in the next session. But with the passage of Northwest Natural's bill, SB 98, that will help a lot, actually. They have not done a lot of projects because, for the simple reason, any renewable natural gas project would not have been rate baseable and would have been completely, all the risk would have been on Northwest Natural. SB 98 flips that on its head and allows them to get a rate of return on those type of investments and to do that, and it gives them the incentive to act. So that changes things pretty dramatically. And since a binding legal agreement will be the first of its kind in the country in this regard, It merits a lot of thought and careful consideration, which should take some time. This is a one-off deal, and while a year may seem like a lot of time, it's really not. Working backwards, that means it has to be signed in a year. That means we have to have a work session and an action session. So that's like, it takes us 3-4 months just to do that. So now we're talking, and then we have not very much time then to left to negotiate a groundbreaking one-off type of agreement that's very complicated. Fortunately, Northwest Natural understands all of this, and they understand where other cities are and where that they may be wanting to take a similar path. And so they're very eager to work with us to set the template for other people to follow. So with a willing partner, I think things move along faster. We just need to make sure that what we get in the end is an enforceable, binding agreement that gets us towards our goals with accountability mechanisms in it that allow us to hold their feet to the fire, so to speak.
Councilor Syret.
Thank you. I had a question and then some comments for a question for staff. So if we decide to extend the franchise agreement for another year and maybe have this conversation that Councilor Zelenko was just referring to during that time, will Northwest Natural be in a position to add more customers to their lines during that time? And are they planning additional build out that would be done during that 1-year time? And if you don't have the answer right now, you can get it to me later.
I don't have the answer off the top of my head, but we will have that for you before you have to make a decision.
Great, thank you. And then just some comments responding to Councilor Zelenka. I could support the idea of a binding agreement as opposed to trying to encumber the franchise fee contract, as long as it includes requirements that move us towards real reductions and not some of the smoke and mirrors that Northwest Natural offered at our work session. And we would need to be in a position to leverage the franchise agreement in order to get them to agree to what I might want to see in that binding agreement. So it will still be a challenge, I think, in terms of the conversation with Northwest Natural, because I was pretty dissatisfied with a lot of the answers they gave us at our work session.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. I have for a very long time thought that the best route to address this issue was, as well as several others that we end up talking about in the area of transportation, is the proliferation of electric vehicles. And I'd like to see that happen as quickly as humanly possible, frankly. I think, frankly, what Mark Frohnmeyer is doing and the things he talks about are brilliant. To that end, I've been talking to EWEB commissioners, a couple of them specifically, for the last couple of years about their capacity. And the gentleman just said the exact right thing that's not a part of this conversation and should be, in my opinion. I don't know how I could motivate staff to do more work with EWEB to tell us about future capacity growth. I think that from what I have heard, and this is the part where I need better education from them, from what I've heard, any gap in capacity to produce electricity would be, for lack of a better way to say it, would use more carbon-intensive methods and end up producing more CO2 emissions to have more electricity than it would to burn it in the first place. And I don't honestly know where that line is. And I would find it immensely helpful if we could do as the gentleman suggested and have better information from them about what is their capacity to grow? What is it that they can produce that people can consume? Because we don't have battery capacity to hold it, so it's got to be regularly done. Where are the gaps? Where's peak demand? Where are there issues, and what do they do during peak demand? And if everybody drove an electric car, that would double or better the kind of load that would be requested of them. Can they do that? If so, when? What's the infrastructure's capacity to carry it? I really would like to know a lot more from them. And I know they've done the work to talk about it and plan. It's just that it hasn't been given to us as much as I would like. So I'd appreciate more of that information. Thanks.
Okay, any other comments? Yes.
On that point, when eWeb was here a couple of months ago and we had a presentation down in a work session, they walked us through what it would take, and their conclusion is that that they would have the resources and the infrastructure to provide mass increase in EVs if they did it right. And right now, so they've looked at that part of it, and the other part of it that they're working on right now is the cost-benefit analysis. My assumption, my quick hit on that is that it actually will benefit eWeb to actually have EV load if they do it right, meaning if you don't put them all on the peak, which would be the stupid way to do it, and you shift them off peak and use off-peak power, which is cheaper and can be done with renewables and can be done with a lower carbon footprint and can actually benefit the ratepayers of eWeb. So they're working on that last part right now. And that's a couple of weeks they'll have that answer, I think.
All right, that's great. I want to thank you all for testifying on this issue where we have time ahead of us to figure out the best sequence, and I appreciate the insights from you, members of the public, about what you think what that timeline should be and what should be included in that discussion. So thank you very much. That closes that hearing, and we are now ready for the second hearing of the night, an ordinance amending and codifying permitted overnight sleeping rest stop program provisions and amending section 4.816 of the Eugene Code 1971. The rules are the same. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. You have to fill out a form. Do I have a pile of the? Oh, I do. I have a pile. So you have to have filled out a request to speak form in advance in order to speak. When you come to the podium, please remember to give your name, city of residence, and for Eugene residents, your ward, if known. You'll have 3 minutes. There are lights on the timer. The red light indicates the end of the 3 minutes. And we have...
Mayor, I just have a couple comments about the ordinance changes. Okay. So tonight's public hearing, as you mentioned, amends the existing ordinance related to the rest stop program. The proposed amendments would allow rest stops to be located in a residential area or close to a school if the city council determines that any potential impacts could be mitigated. The proposed amendments would also alter how city funds could be utilized for this program. This item is scheduled for action on July 22nd.
Thank you. We have 6 people signed up. The first is Donna Riddle, followed by David Ivan Piccioni.
Still short. Donna Riddle, Springfield, Oregon. I, too, I want to applaud you for taking the small step in loosening the criteria so that more rest stops can be established. If any of you want to see what a great rest stop looks like, I would invite you to go see the Nightingale Rest Stop at 34th and Hilliard, because it is fantastic. So I just want you to know that we need lots more, and anything you can do to help create more housing for people would be greatly needed and appreciated. Since I am in Springfield, and I also have Northwest Gas, although I've replaced my gas fireplace with the electric ductless heat pump, I encourage you to do everything you can to rein in Northwest Natural Gas and to discourage, for me, it's not the stuff that's going in the air so much as it's what's going into the ground as they frack that gas with 500 and some odd chemicals to bring it out of the ground. It's destroying clean water. And the final thing is, please don't spend money renaming Washington Jefferson Park, because you'd have to spend money on new signs for everything. It costs money. Just be simple. Leave it like it is. Thank you.
Thank you. David Ivan Piccioni, followed by Tracy Jocelyn.
Hi, David Ivan Piccioni. And before I forget, I want to comment on something you said, Sir Claire. You said that when they took out the trees in a particular area, that they were immediately replaced. Now, you can figure a tree about this big is going to form a lot more oxygen from carbon dioxide than a tiny little guy. We should be planting the tiny little guys, but we should protect the big guys as much as we can. I've been feeling kind of down whenever the subject of oceans comes up. I don't see it as beautiful, full of fish. I see islands of plastic. So the good news that I heard recently, and I'm getting some more details about it, is I don't know if this just evolved or if it was created in a lab, but they have bacteria that within their digestive capabilities can metabolize plastic. I don't know if it can metabolize all of the 7 types of plastics or 8 or however many there are, but it's a damn good start. Yeah, and this thing about which we're just going to come after is about what are we going to do about the people that are homeless and if they're sleeping in your front yard and all. I don't want to wake up and see a front yard with mess and people sleeping there and blah blah. But it doesn't matter what I want, because population is growing. I'm not doing it. It's growing. Where are you going to put people? You're going to keep building up, build sideways, build underwater, anyway. And one of the things that the environmentalists omit, they talk, electricity is wonderful. How are you going to get the electricity? Like Benjamin Franklin with a kite? No, you got to find a really good source of electricity. Burning fossil fuels is not one of them. And the one that we use here, the hydropower, it sounds really good, but it's not good for the fish.
David, this is a public hearing about rest stops, and you have 38 seconds left. I'm wondering if you want to address rest stops.
So sleeping outside because people have over-reproduced is something that we all have to contend with, and we are contending with it right now. So if you have a choice, use birth control. Sex is, sex should be, it's a good thing, but you don't have to have a baby every time you have sex.
Thank you. I would hope. Okay, that's rest stops. Tracy Jocelyn, followed by Michael Gannon.
Hello, hello, hello. My name is Tracy Jocelyn, Eugene resident, 37 years. I currently live in Ward 2. These are serious times. We could be more efficient and effective with our approach to caring for fellow human beings, yet today is a great time to acknowledge rest stops. Rest stops work. We are Nightingale Hosted Shelters Rest Stop. I'm co-manager. I met 2 women this weekend. Both of their situations are dire where safety is concerned. They come by, do you have space? Can you help me? I listen to their stories, just not every story. I've been at this a while. Not every story. But they were women, I respected them by listening, and maybe a reminder of what it was like to be out there scrambling, but they could start a rest stop. They could get more women and start a rest stop. They could organize a rest stop. People who camp together for safety and they get along, they can start a rest stop. Shelter care can start a rest stop. Federal dollars, I don't know if you can separate those in a budget because it's substandard housing, but Whitebird can start a rest stop. Willamette family can start a rest stop. How about Lane County Behavioral Health, all that land? In addition, each neighborhood group should be finding the best location for a rest stop in their area. We are at 34th and Hilliard with the help from an advocate. We worked with the Southeast Neighborhood Association and our city liaison and worked things out. We are in a neighborhood, have been for over 2 years. Good Samaritan Care Center borders to the south, and a home is 30 feet west of us, as well as a house across from that home. We cause no disruption. You can't even tell we're there. We bring business to neighboring businesses. We provide friendliness to neighbors, assistance if needed. We represent ourselves as people who are unhoused, and we are thriving in our rest stop. Thank you, City of Eugene, our Board of Directors, Good Samaritan, and Southeast Neighbors.
Thank you. Michael Gannon, followed by Eric Jackson.
Well, thank you again. I'm Michael Gannon. I live in Eugene. I wrote one of those long letters that I've been reminded of frequently that the council never reads, the one that's addressed to the mayor, the city manager, and the councilors together. So it was about rest stops, and I sent it in November, and I offered a number of really practical suggestions on how you could make improvements in them. And the only people who responded to that suggestion were people who read the copy that I put on the email list for the homeless working group of the Human Rights Commission, which, by the way, struggles because it's not getting the support that it needs from the city. So I was sort of surprised that not a single person on the council talked to me about those 7 reasonable, useful innovations that could be applied to the rest stops. On the other hand, a number of people who know of the rest stops and are advocates for homeless people, and I don't know if any of them have lived on the streets or in a rest stop, but they thought the ideas were terrific. So I became familiar with the gap that exists between the council members, the staff, the mayor, and the city manager. And I realized that there's a lot of really critical things going on that are difficult to explain in a 3-minute testimony in front of people that you don't think are really paying attention anyway. And I know how impolitic it is to be so candid with what I think. But the ideas were good. I got a lot of praise when I was taking city planning at UCLA for the ideas that I was presenting. But they're not getting any mileage in Eugene, and I'm presenting those ideas about rest stops as an expert because I've lived in them and I've lived on the streets of Eugene for 12 years. But you do not talk to the people who are experts on the problems that you have and could solve them for you if you worked with them. It is demoralizing beyond anything I can say more.
Thank you. Thank you. Eric Jackson, followed by Heather Salicki.
Don't do signs.
You guys look at the camera. Eric Jackson. Rest stops, the dusk to dawn, the dawn to dawn. Any attempts going with them. They're fantastic if they happen. I couldn't even come close to following up what Tracy has said with the number of organizations in this community that have the ability to become rest stop initiatives. The downside of not having places for people to go that are camping in the city on the right of way, including where the sidewalk goes to concrete and then curb, are still being thrown out, contrary to what was told to us 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Concrete, they can't call and trespass you. Yes, they can. All they have to do is put duct tape on the ground and say, we're going to put planters in. And then they can trespass you. And we all got trespass tickets for being on the concrete between the sidewalk and the curb. It was very interesting and contrary to what was said here. If you don't have a rest stop to suggest somebody be aligned with, and if you don't do the same thing that you did on the 12th or 13th of December, when you said 6-1 no to turning into St. Vincent's, if you don't put half your money into everybody else and not every penny, every decision into your authorized, pre-approved vendor, St. Vincent's de Paul, that doesn't have to do pay down sheets, doesn't have to submit what they're spending on their campers, doesn't have to have trained staff, hires family members that are unskilled, and housing lots of people. And they've thrown out dozens and dozens of people and 86 them from the properties for life, as well as the numbers of them that have been sent away temporarily, whether it be in the middle of the night cold, raining, no property with you, everything stays, you can't leave with anything. It's improper management. We, as Michael said, are the experts. We did a good job at 99, at 525 south, north, for a good long time, much longer than anybody thought it could ever go, because they set it up to fail. No rodent traps on the back of county property outside. Odd. But we didn't have rodents because we had dogs and cats. But that was in the paper. The overdose that we had, the person was saved because of community. That wasn't in the paper. Several overdoses was a lie. One fire? Yeah, that was me. Because I wasn't getting proper sleep because the county said, nobody's managing here. But yet they sent me, all the county people, to talk to Eric Jackson.
Thank you.
You got to help the rest stops.
Thank you.
Grandfather everybody in that.
Thank you. Heather Salicki.
Heather Salicki, Ward 2. And I'm here to ask you to support the changes to the ordinance for rest stops. I can attest to the difficulty in trying to cite them. I spent a long time trying to do that, and the restriction on being near residentials and schools was a burden, as was the who owns the land. So those are some important changes that you'll be making. But all it's going to do is really get our foot in the door where we may not have had it before because it was illegal to have it there. What the rest stops really need is funding to be successful, just like our other shelter models. And really, when you look on Wednesday for the homeless systems implementation plan, you'll see that rest stops aren't included. It's just one big tent model, a sprung shelter. And I'm not saying we don't need that, but we need other models where people can have some privacy. Rest stops are a form of supported shelter, more so than a big tent model. I mean, we're looking for ways to help people with their pets and possessions and partners, and having these smaller units where people can have that privacy and have a little longer to stay somewhere while they're waiting for housing to become available is really important. And the way we've been looking at rest stops, we could really kind of open our minds with that. I mean, what if we started to look at them as community centers? Think of Train Song. It's 2 miles to the nearest grocery store. What if we put a rest stop there that also had a food pantry or some kind of food distribution system to help that neighborhood? What if You know, we had, like in Southwest Hills in Ward 2, they're having a big emergency preparedness effort. What if there was a small rest stop that could distribute supplies during their stay there? So that these are integrated parts of the community where people can meet and get to know each other. So I urge you, please, when you examine the implementation plan, think of ways that you can add this low-cost shelter option to the mix. I think we could really match those rest stops to meet some of our community need. Thank you.
Thank you. And that closes that public hearing. Are there, yes, Councilor Saret?
Thank you, folks, for coming out to share your views on our rest stops and what we're hoping to do with them. Mr. Gannon, I wish you had used your 3 minutes to share your list of 7 suggestions rather than articulating your disappointment about our lack of response, because not only then would those counselors who hadn't read your email hear those suggestions, so would all the folks who are watching on Metro TV and the webcast, and it would expand the universe of knowledge of those suggestions. I would try to look up that email, but I'm locked out of my email right now. And I'm sure that I read your email, unless it was several pages long, and then I will be honest with you, I probably skimmed it. But I don't recall those specific 7 suggestions off the top of my head, but I'm happy when I'm able to look back at them. And I also agree that we need to do better in terms of including people who know these issues through lived experience and include them at the table while we're making decisions. Not necessarily at the high level we're still at, but at the implementation tactical level for how we do the improvements to our homeless system that we're coming out of the TAC report. So I appreciate your comments around that as well.
Any other comments? Okay, thank you very much. We are finished with that public hearing, and we'll now go on to our 3rd public hearing. Proposal to rename Washington Jefferson Park as Edwin R. Smith Park in honor of Ed Smith. Do we need any explanation? There we go.
Thank you, Mayor. On January 14th, Council passed a motion to request that the mayor create an ad hoc committee in accordance with council policy on naming of public facilities to consider the request to rename Washington Jefferson Park in honor of Edwin Smith. On July 1st, the ad hoc naming committee submitted a memo to mayor and council recommending Washington Jefferson Park be renamed after Edwin R. Smith while retaining the name of the W.J. Skate Park. They further recommended that the welcome sign at the park be replaced with one that reads Edwin R. Smith Park and W.J. Skate Park. Tonight's public hearing provides the public an opportunity to comment on the proposed name change.
Thank you. And we have 3 folks who have signed up to testify, and same rules. You need to have completed a request to speak form in advance in order to speak. When you come to the podium, please remember to give your name, city of residence, and for Eugene residents, your ward. You will have 3 minutes. There are lights on the timer, and the red light indicates the end of 3 minutes. First up is John Etter, followed by Terry Smith.
Good evening. I'm John Etter. I currently live in Portland. I own property in Betty Taylor's ward, judging from lawn signs. I don't know which number that is. And I've been planning to move back here before long. When Ed passed 4.5 years ago, a lot of staff at the memorial service began thinking, you know, what could be done to remember Ed Smith for. And we pretty quickly came around the idea of renaming Washington Jefferson Park. When that park was first constructed, we already had a Washington Park. There was a Jefferson Park where the old pool was, and by default, it became Washington Jefferson Park. Because of Ed's skill in working with the state, we got a park that was not on a landfill. It did not have rosebush banks. It came with sidewalks, drainage, turf, all as a part of roadside landscaping. A real genius stroke that we got that much from the state. It was a good head start on a park that admittedly has had some trouble, but it's been developed and maturing into something that is now nationally famous for its skate park thing. It's won an award, I believe, for creativity. I don't need to tell you all the things Ed Smith has done for the city, a lot of things. But this seemed like an excellent place to remember Ed Smith. So there's a lot of us that would love to see this park renamed for Ed. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry Smith, followed by Marjorie Smith.
Mayor Venice, members of the council, my name is Terry Smith, and I too live in the ward represented by Betty Taylor. I'm also a founding board member of the Eugene Parks Foundation, and you have a letter from us proposing and supporting this renaming. Before I began work on the Parks Foundation, there was a lot of history about Eugene's park system I did not know, and it's really quite a glorious history. Unlike hundreds, perhaps thousands of communities across the U.S., a major transportation project did not divide a community in half, Whitaker, that would have happened had there been a landfill, a 30-foot landfill with a road on top, as ODOT had planned. As it happened, Ed had been a landscape planner for ODOT some years earlier, and he brought to the conversation a knowledge of the federal regulations and the monies that were available to implement the creation of a park there, and he knew who to call and who to talk to, and he got that done. The issue of the naming has quite significant precedence. Another naming that occurred is Tugman Park, and it was named for William Tugman, who, an interesting story is, he was the editor of the RG, and he would come to public hearings like this, and if Parks was on the agenda, not only would he report the meeting in the RG, he would sign up and testify. And it was through his leadership that the Century Progress Fund got created, which bought the land that the Amazon Park was built on, and South Amazon Park was later renamed in his honor. So that's a precedent that I think is quite parallel. The issue of the WJ Skate Park and its international fame is quite easily handled. Just as Campbell Center, Lamb Cottage, and Hilliard Center are not named after the parks they are in, the WJ Skate Park will retain its own separate identity, though I do think there may be a future naming opportunity there that we need to talk about in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Marjorie Smith.
I'm Ed Smith's wife. I just want to thank you for even considering this request from people in the community who support Ed and for the people who worked with him for many years. He was part of the park system for over 30 years. And our kids once in a while would complain when they started school that they had to go to school, but Daddy got to go play in the parks. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and that closes the hearing. Are there? Yeah, no, I'm just lining it up, okay, Councilor Taylor, and clearly Councilor Ye, eager to speak. Anybody else? Councilor Syret, got it? Okay, Councilor Taylor.
Thank you. There's no doubt that that Ed Smith's memory deserves recognition. I think perhaps something more than a name would be better. A monument in the park that describes what his contributions would be good. People forget what something is named for. Like, I didn't know anything about Tugman, but I think a monument. I do have sympathy for the people who wrote against renaming. And I prefer to name something doesn't have a name already. But I hope that there can be, a statue would be appropriate if that was possible, but some kind of monument that lists his accomplishments. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Ye.
Thank you. So first, I want to thank the committee and everyone who came out to speak tonight. According to the memorandum from the committee that we got, they identified and analyzed potential consequences and financial implications of renaming the park after Edwin Smith. But I want to ask us tonight, are those really the questions that we wanted them to answer? Place naming, essentially for a prominent park with a diverse history, should not be done casually. The standard should not be only expense and negative reactions. Public places like Washington Jefferson Park are important community spaces. And when done right, place naming can enhance those spaces by creating a cultural environment or carrying concepts through time. Or they can be essentially arbitrary. We need to ask what parts of our community's diverse culture are not being represented in our public place names. Or are there concepts or values in our community that we want to emphasize for ourselves or for future residents? Edwin Smith was an exceptional city employee who went above and beyond in multiple departments during his career. It would be appropriate to find some way to document and share to the public that important role and others when making this park. And I actually really like Betty's suggestion of having some sort of signage in the park that tells that story for people. But in how long will most residents lose the connection between his name and the legacy? Like we said, what is Tugman? Who is Sheldon Community Center named after? Most of us don't know these answers. We name places after individuals to honor people, but we honor those people because of what their legacy means into the future. It carries something that we want future residents to remember. And I suggest that if we're serious about renaming this park, that it deserves a much broader community conversation, and that the process that we've had so far is just not something that I can support.
Okay, Councilor Surratt.
Thank you. Well, I'm very grateful to Mr. Smith for his role in establishing this park in my neighborhood. It's a real asset to the neighborhood. One of our speakers mentioned the cost and said we shouldn't spend any money on this. I believe the committee says the cost would be about $400. I think that is an amount we can spare to provide this small honor to recognize the contribution Mr. Smith made in working to ensure that this park exists and is here for us and the Whitaker neighborhood, which was bisected by the freeway. And I appreciate the work of the committee, and I think the recommendation was thoughtful and takes into account the identity of the skate park as a kind of separate, enclosed but yet distinct part of the park. And to Councilor Ye's comments, I think this process does have its limitations in terms of the council naming policy. While I fully support the recommendations of the committee, and I want to thank them for their work, I also think our renaming policy, or when we consider a name change, could be a more robust process, because I think the thing that was missing for me was the opportunity for other people to say, well, I have a different idea of who or what entity we might name this for, and could we have a discussion about that? And so I do think there's a lacking there that I think that we could explore as a council. But I will still support the recommendations of this committee.
Councilor Clark.
I was just going to add, because it's an interesting conversation, that for those that want to read a very, very interesting story about how Spencer's Butte got its name, the three McCornack sisters wrote a book called Eugene, The History of Eugene, First Century, in which they regale that story, and I won't do it here, but I highly encourage you to go and find that book in the library and read how Spencer's Butte got its name. It's pretty interesting.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Thank you all. I actually appreciate Councilor Ye bringing this up. I do think it's worth a conversation, and Councilor Syret as well, about how we make this sort of broader and more inclusive and bringing in some voices that we often don't hear from. So some of the equity panel work that we did with the Climate Action Plan, brings to mind. We have some other tools at our disposal now. So thank you all. That closes the public hearing and closes the meeting.